I am fully human and I am fully divine. Together? I am fully human and I am fully divine. And there's no contradiction there. You know, your humanity is symbolized by this horizontal expression, which is my arms out to the sides. And your divinity is that vertical expression. And where do they meet? In the heart. That's where it's the synthesis. That's where it all comes together. But you can't make a spiritual bypass. Have you ever made a spiritual bypass?
Yes.
Get so lofty and so abstract and so out there that you're no earthly good? My meditation teacher a few months ago called me on that. I was getting into all kinds of cosmic this and cosmic that, and she said, you know what? You need to ground yourself. You need to focus on, and this may sound kind of cosmic, but it's the Christ consciousness, which is that fully human, fully divine aspect of being. And of course, fully manifested in Jesus, but not as some kind of abstract out there, he did it for me so I don't have to do it and I can behave like terribly. But rather, he is a way shower, he's a demonstration and showing me how to integrate those two aspects of my being. You know, I shared during the beginning of the service about that Serbian proverb. It says, be humble because you're made of the earth. And be noble because you're made of starlight. And I believe they were speaking of the two creations in Genesis. Now this may seem a little abstract, but I think it's so cool that, you know, they talk about Genesis, and Unity does not take the Bible literally, but takes it as an allegorical expression of spiritual truth. But something I didn't know about until my first week in ministerial school is that there really are two creations. God creates the heavens and the earth and humanity, and then the seventh day he rested, and then he starts over again in the fourth verse of this second chapter of Genesis. How many people know about the two creations? They're actually done by two different names of God. The first one is Elohim, which is a plural name of God. They think that it was a really early time in history, pre-Jewish history, where they had multiple gods, because it's a plural. Elohim is not... it would be Eloha if it was singular. Okay, I'm getting too nerdy here. But that first creation is the spiritual creation. It's the light, the let there be light. And it's a beautiful spiritual creation of the spiritual you. And the second one is Jehovah or Yahweh creating out of the dust of the earth, out of the clay, out of the dirt. Oh, isn't that strange? Did somebody mess up? I mean, most historians think that there were two competing stories, and in order to bring all the people together, they sewed them together. And they kind of sewed them kind of roughly about the fourth verse of the second chapter. But I love what it says about us. What it says about you. You're fully human and you are fully divine. I am fully human and I am fully divine. Together? I am fully human and I am fully divine. You're divine first. I mean, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin said, you're a spiritual being having a human experience, but you're really having a human experience. Let me just read parts of it to you. And Elohim, God, said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw that that light was good. And then God said, let us, plural, make the human being after our image and likeness. And on the seventh day, God rested. Okay. Then he's done, right? Oh, wait. And then Yahweh God formed the human being from the dirt in the earth and blew life into his nostrils, and the human being came to be. I'm telling you about this because it's something that we sometimes bypass. And I was getting so lofty, so cosmic, so out there, and believe me, I can get out there, that my teacher was saying, no, you need to ground yourself. How do you ground yourself? Get into the now moment. How do you get into the now moment? You bring yourself back to center. I mean, you got your human self. You got your divine self. And in the middle is your heart. How do you get into your heart? Well, the analogy comes in my mind of when I was a kid. And it was the days before all the insurance companies made them take these things out of the playgrounds. Remember in the old playgrounds, some of you are old enough like me to remember, how they had this merry-go-round type thing that somebody would push. You know, always a bigger kid would push because that kid would try to get going so fast that you'd spin off of it. Did you ever spin off of it and tumble and fall? I did. Yeah. And so what did you do when they were pushing this circular merry-go-round thing so fast? What was the only thing you could do besides spin off of it? Hang on. That's good. But what if you couldn't? You would just inch your way to the center. You'd move to the center. Now look at your life. Look at all the stuff that's going on in your life. It's whipping around. You got to go to the center. You got to go to the center. Go into the center, into your heart. You know, and how do you do that? You get quiet. There's so many practices, so many ways. We got to experience that during the meditation time, didn't we? Didn't you? Just watching your heartbeat, feeling it. Feeling the blood coursing through your body. Feeling the actual pressure of the air upon your skin. You know, Eckhart Tolle in The Power of Now talked about that. He said, the best way to get into the now, the best way to be spiritual, is to get into your body. To ground yourself, to get into your body. You know, I wasn't in my body. I remember about 35 years ago, I'd gone through a bunch of stuff, and that was a huge time of transition. And what came to me in meditation was, you're not in your body. You know, I was in my head. I was in all my... And I'd never really ever been in my body. I was not athletic at all. I just had labeled myself not athletic. And so I just didn't bother with any of that stuff. What came to me is that you got to ground yourself. And I had the most beautiful healing experience because I just one by one did all the stuff that I had never allowed myself to do. I learned how to play tennis. Not well, and I stopped doing it after a while. Learned how to play golf. Ditto. I learned how to, actually went to one time to volleyball. That's all it took. I did learn how to ski, and I was actually pretty good at that. But I joined a health club, and I exercised every day, either there or running. And now I exercise every day. The dog makes me. He gets squirrely if I don't take him out there. And so I get squirrely too, because you got to ground yourself. How do you get in touch with that center of you? You got to find out where that center is. Sometimes it's just getting still. You know, I had a situation once where I had a bunch of stuff out here and I was trying to fix it out here and it wasn't working. You ever do that? And so, and it's been enough years that I can share this story safely, I think. It's been about, oh gosh, almost 30 years. But I became the minister of a church that had a school. And the school was about 4 or 5 times the size in terms of the budget of the church. And the school was very successful except for one thing. I didn't know anything about being in charge of a school, and I was supposed to be in charge of it. So I was supervising 47 employees. I was supposed to be in charge of all these things, and the guy before me who I replaced had been a headmaster, so he knew how to do it, but I didn't. So the first thing I did is I went to the board and I said, let's get an audit so that I can understand what's going on there. So they never had one in all their history. That school was founded. It was a Montessori school founded by Maria Montessori's personal assistant, one of the first 5 in the United States. And it was founded about 1960. So, oh my gosh, it turns out that we brought in an auditor and he looked at our books, and all of our books were kept in shoe boxes. Yeah, in boxes. And they didn't really have any real system of doing anything. And he looked at it and he says, I can't do an audit. I got to bring in a bookkeeper to get your books in order. And so he hired somebody who he thought would know what she's doing. Turns out she was a very honest person, but she didn't really do much of anything. In fact, things got worse in that she didn't really keep the books, and we didn't realize that we were headed for a tremendous financial catastrophe. And when she found out that we found out, she got all of the shoe boxes together, packed them, moved to Kauai. And we found that out. Oh my gosh, what do we do? So what did I do? What are we going to do? It looks like we're going to head for a crash. And we also were finding out that there had been stuff going on that wasn't up and up. And so what did I do? I went on a retreat. I went on a spiritual retreat for 3 or 4 days. I went up into the mountains of the Appalachians. I got a cabin. And I spent my time doing spiritual work. Now, but I did a balance. I hiked. And I did my exercise, but I also got quiet. I took the Lord's Prayer and the 23rd Psalm and our opening invocation that we use in our service and the prayer of St. Francis. Prayers that I knew by heart so I wouldn't be in my head about them. And I would say them aloud and whisper them and say them silently and just keep the energy moving the energy up, up, up. Well, while I was gone, somebody came forward and gave a bridge loan to take care of our immediate catastrophe. And then, it was a beautiful thing. The woman who had taken all the books just sent them all back. And we were able to get a financial controller who had retired, who had been in charge of Comcast. He was the financial controller of all of Comcast for 13 states, but he was retired, so he just wanted a little thing to putter around, so putter on down. And we had a bunch of other stuff to deal with, and it had come to me in meditation while I was on this trip. We needed to get some board members and to ask this gentleman if he would be willing to be on the board. I didn't realize that this gentleman owned a bank, that he'd been the financial controller of a city, that he had spent years as an auditor for one of the big 8 firms. I didn't know any of that. And he came in and he brought everything into shape, and he brought in a guy who was a risk manager who came in and did about $10,000 worth of pro bono work, cleaned up all the problems that we had, and took care of the whole thing. And last time I found out, he was still there and they were still doing their thing. So what am I telling you this about? I'm saying that if you will pull back from that outer thing that's whipping around and move into the center, you'll find that things will work themselves out so much better. You'll be guided. You'll get quiet enough that you'll know. I had a friend of mine who was in business with his brothers. There's 4 brothers. One of the brothers was an addict. Another one was a codependent. I don't know what was wrong. I think the third one had some emotional problems. And my friend. And so it was. He says it's just whipping around, and it's whipping and it's whipping. And how did he handle it? He took it into the quiet, and what came to him was go into the center of the cyclone. And his affirmation he used was, I let it whip. Together? I let it whip. You let it whip. Go into the center. Get grounded. Get balanced. Get free. Make your spiritual practices part of yourself. Don't just make it something out here. You know, Charles Fillmore talked about that. He said, if you're depending for spiritual enlightenment on a book or a church's ritual or some doctrine or some teacher or leader, don't expect to have it. It is the state of prayer that brings it. The state of prayer that brings it. You've got to practice. You've got to make it real. You've got to make it a part of yourself. You know, there was a woman who had a baby, and she had a book on child rearing, and she told me about this, that she was furiously looking through the book because the baby was crying, and her mother-in-law was there, and the mother-in-law said to her, put down the book and pick up the baby. And that's all she needed to do. You know, we have all our spiritual pursuits. And a few months ago, I was just really pursuing, cosmic this and cosmic that. But you know, sometimes you just put down the book and you pick up the baby. You move into the now moment. The now moment. You think, well, we often think of it as a really religious thing. We think of it as something that's kind of separate out here, you know, something for Sundays or something like that. But I saw a video this last week of a documentary that just came out about a man whom I've talked about on Sunday mornings named Sidney Rittenberg. Now, Sidney Rittenberg was a communist Chinese official. He was an American who moved over there and was best buddies with Chairman Mao and ran their radio and TV and all their media for all of China. Unfortunately, he came afoul and ran into getting into a conflict with Stalin the first time, and then later with Chairman Mao's wife. Don't get into a dispute with her because she'll win. And he spent 17 years in solitary confinement. 17 years, most of which he was not allowed to hear another person, let alone he was not allowed even to talk to himself. He'd be punished for that. And he said, I was never alone during those 17 years because there was myself, my own madness sitting across from me, and it was him or me. So he said, I realized it had to be me. And he had a belief system. He had no religious training whatsoever, no religious background, no spiritual anything. But he had one thing. He had his consciousness. And so he watched his thoughts and observed them. He noticed his thinking, noticed and watched and followed his thinking back to its source, and he had this awakening. He said, I had spiritual, cosmic experiences that I read about now in all the books of all the spiritual teachers and the mystics and the this and that, but I didn't even know what was happening to me. But when the first time he stayed in China and they let him out, and the second time they said, you can go home now. And he says, yeah, I'll go home. But he's now in his 90s. He lives in Seattle. He's a consultant, but he's also a spiritual teacher in a certain sense, but not using any religious terminology because he didn't have any. But it's innate. It's innate with him. Within him and within you, he just plugged into it because he had nothing else he could do. But for you, you can choose. Take the time. Enjoy nature. Get in touch with your breathing. Listen to your heartbeat. Watch your breath. Feel the energy. Feel the energy. And realize that you are fully human and you are fully divine. I am fully human and I am fully divine. Together? I am fully human and I am fully divine. Jesus was fully human and fully divine. And although this is a long quote, I usually don't read them, it's the most beautiful depiction of James Dillard Freeman, Unity's Poet Laureate. And he was the director of Silent Unity for many years, but he was raised in an atheist family. He was raised Jewish, and he was adopted by the Fillmores, but never really was comfortable with a lot of Christian terminology. And he went, he said, to visit a friend who was in a Catholic hospital, and he had the most interesting experience. I'm just going to read it to you. He said that I never cared much for crucifixes, but he went into the chapel there because he had a few minutes because his friend was in surgery. He said, I sat there staring at this divine man suffering on a cross, and suddenly I understood in a way I never understood before what Jesus can mean to a human being. God, loving us so much that he identifies with us and is born and grows and lives and weeps and laughs and shares our hurts, rejoices in our blessings, lets himself suffer and die, inspires us to try to be more, not so much by his divine teachings as by his human example, simply saying, follow me, what I do, you can do also. What kind of God is this? And as I gazed on this man, it was as if I could hear God saying through that silent figure, I'm not leaving you to suffer alone. I'm feeling what you're feeling. I understand what you're going through. For I have been hungry. I have been thirsty. I have been a stranger. I have been naked. I have been sick. I have been in prison. I have been even the least among you. I am one with you. I love you. Is he very God, a very God? Yes, but he's very human too. And if God is the formless absolute of absolutes, he's also the human form of love with its power to comfort us when we hurt and identify with us when we feel left alone, to strengthen us when we grow weak. Sometimes when we speak of God as love, love is no more than a beautiful abstraction. But when we can see God as this man, then God becomes his warm eyes, his tender smile, the gentle touch of love itself. Jesus is the human heart of the divine reality. Oh, it's a beautiful thing, regardless of where you are at or what woundedness you have from your childhood upbringing. There's something really powerful in what he's saying here, a powerful experience that he had and that we could have as well. And as I read the life of Myrtle Fillmore when I was in ministerial school, I read that we always hear that she had these healings of 2 terminal illnesses and she used affirmations, but when she learned how to meditate, the way she learned how to meditate was she just got a chair, sat it next to her, visualized Jesus in the chair, put her arm out, her hand out, and just imagined his love flowing through his hand into her hand. She said later in her life she didn't do that. She'd grown into a point where that wasn't necessary, but it was helpful to her. Now, when I was in ministerial school, just after I read that, I went through a really tough time, and I was going through something called the L&O Committee, Licensing and Ordination, where they interview you. It's almost like the orals, you know, and quarterly they would question you about things. They would give you oral tests, verbal tests. And one of the tests was they asked me to define Jesus Christ. Define Jesus Christ. Well, I gave them the best paraphrase of my textbook understanding of what Charles Fillmore had said about Jesus Christ. But I said, let me tell you how I dealt with my dad's death. I would sit in the chair like Myrtle did, and I put my hand out, and I would just imagine him and his hand in mine, and I'd feel that warm, divine love. And that was my experience. You see, I was putting down the book and picking up the baby. And there was somebody on that committee who was very offended by it. It wasn't abstract enough. It was a little too orthodox for him, and he let me know it. Well, afterwards, I went out to the hall, and the 2 oldest people on that committee, they were both in their 80s, at the time in the 1970s, and they both were students, personal students of Charles Fillmore, and they introduced themselves to me. One was Marion Brown, the other was Lillian Matthews, who founded the church in Buffalo. And they came up to me and they said, "We're not supposed to do this, so if you tell anybody we've done it, we're going to deny it." But Charles Fillmore was a personal teacher of ours, and he would have been proud of your answer, and don't let anybody take it away from you. You know, get into your experience. Get into your experience of life. Get into your experience of God. Get into your experience of your divinity. You know, don't let it be secondhand. And you say, "Oh, it's so lofty, it's so far away." No, it's a part of you. You know, this is part of our Western mindset where we separate out our spirituality and our humanity, our divinity and our humanity. But they're all to be experienced together. I remember reading about Charles Fillmore and Myrtle Fillmore and how she said that Native American teaching was much closer to the spirit and the heart of what Jesus taught than what most Christians teach, because they didn't separate the spiritual and the human, and neither did he. And I remember being on the on-ramp hitchhiking around the country in early Martin, California, and this guy walked up, was let out of a car, and he walked up, and he was wearing clothes that didn't match, that didn't fit him, and he introduced himself to me. Turns out he was a medicine man on the way to a convocation of medicine men for the West Coast, but he had just dropped out of college. He'd been student body president of California State University at Northridge, but he wanted to become an attorney, but he realized what he really needed to do was to go back to his reservation. And so we started talking, and I shared with him about unity. And he said, "That's exactly what we believe. I've never met anybody who wasn't a Native American who believed in those things." And I shared with him that Charles Fillmore was raised on the reservation. His father was the man who ran the trading post, and he actually had been kidnapped as a child and used in ceremonies for 2 or 3 days, and then safely brought back to his mother. His mother would never talk about it. She was traumatized by it, but he knew it was a wonderful experience, even though he had no conscious memory of it. I think I've shared before that years later, I was teaching about this in a church, and it was the Ojibwe tribe, and a guy who taught classes in our church came up to me and says, "I grew up on that reservation, the Red Cloud Reservation in Minnesota, and they talked about this young boy who was going to do a great spiritual work. I didn't know it was Charles Fillmore. I've been in unity all my life, ever since I left the reservation, because it's the closest thing." My point being that there's no separation. There's no separation. You know, that's when the missionaries would show up, the Native Americans would say, "Why do you separate things out Monday through Saturday, and then Sunday there's something different?" I love this quote from Charles Fillmore. He says, "Many of us live in two worlds, one for 6 days of the week when we run things, and the other on the seventh day when we give God a chance to show what God can do." Do everything 7 days a week in the glory of God rather than one. Take God into all of your affairs. And realize that you're part of the natural progression of life. You're part of the natural evolution of life itself. That the perfection that is within you is perfect, like the rose is perfect. You know, the rose is perfect at every state of its perfection. The rose is perfect as a seed and as a shoot and as a plant and as a bud and as a flower, and even after it wilts. Every stage of the rose is perfect. And it reminded me of how people in the 12-step movement see themselves not as fixed or done, but constantly in a process, a constant process of unfoldment. You are God unfolding. Unfolding in the human sense, that's this part. In the divine sense, that's this part. And in the center is what? It's your heart. Go into your heart. How do you go into your heart? Well, get quiet enough and just kind of feel what's going on in your body. And your heart will emerge. Your heart has a life of its own. It has an awareness of its own. And it's seeking you. Your heart is seeking you. You can seek your heart, but your heart wants you more than you want your heart. And it's going to rush to you if you get quiet enough. I'm just feeling led to go into a meditation. We tried it at the first service, and it's called the blending or merging with the Christ. And it's a very simple meditation. So I'm going to ask you to just kind of get quiet and just take a moment and just feel once again the pressure of the air upon your face and your hands, and notice the breathing in and out naturally. Feel your heart beating. And now imagine that you are along the shore of a huge lake, large enough that you can't see to the other side. This is Galilee. This is the Sea of Galilee, and you're walking in sandals along the pebbles along the shore, and you can see the waves gently lapping up on the shore. As you're walking along in the sunlight, you can breathe the fresh water air, and it's a beautiful, warm spring day. And suddenly you notice in the distance that there is a figure walking towards you in robes, also in sandals, coming to you closer and closer. And when you get close enough, the compassionate eyes, the warm smile, and it's the Master Jesus. And you see this warm, loving figure coming closer to you as you come closer to him. And when you finally approach him, he puts out his arms and looks into your eyes. You see the warm compassion. You feel more than see the smile. And he embraces you and puts his arms around you. You've never been loved like this before. And the warmth of this hug, the warmth of this embrace is such that it just absorbs into your body. There's no longer you and him. It's just the warmth of this merging and blending. And just be aware of it. Be aware of this oneness and this warmth. I am fully human and I am fully divine, even as he is fully human and fully divine. And I know there is no separation between me and this great spiritual being, between me and my own divinity. I am part of a seamless whole, and I celebrate my oneness. I celebrate my humanity, and in my humanity, I celebrate my divinity. And so it is. Amen. And now just take a nice deep breath and let it out. And we're going to get in touch with that physical aspect of us, our bodies, and use our body awareness to open us up to divine awareness. And so set aside all the papers and things in your hands and just open yourself and take another deep breath. And just begin by becoming aware of the air pressure just gently pressing upon your hands and your face, and the tingling in every cell of your body. Gently allow yourself to become aware of your blood coursing through your veins. Your beating heart. Just notice it. And now become aware of your breathing, naturally coming in and out, and just watch it. Notice it. And when you feel like your mind is wandering, just bring it back to one of these sensations. The air upon your skin. The blood coursing through your veins, your body. Your breath coming in and out naturally. I am fully human. And I am fully divine. I am a spiritual being having a human experience. And And I embrace it all. I am the perfect balance, the synthesis of the physical and the spiritual, and I let it all be and I let it all express. This now moment is the awareness. Of this breath coming in and out. My beating heart. The feeling of the air upon my skin. Fully embracing my humanity opens the door to my divinity. This now moment, this experience of the who that I am, I embrace all of me. God loves me and so do I. God cherishes me, and so do I. God cares for me, so do I. I accept myself as I am, embraced. In my fully human, fully divine love. Let myself once again become aware of my breath, my heart, the tingling in my body and on my skin. And without thought, I just bring myself back again and again to this awareness. Fully human, fully divine. I embrace every part of my being and I let myself be. I let it be. I feel myself in this now moment, accepting my body, my emotions, my thoughts, letting it all be. And in this awareness and acceptance, I experience myself as the fully spiritual being. There's no more spiritual time than this time. And in truth, I am as spiritual as I'll ever be. For I am already made image and likeness. God. Thank you, God. And so it is. Time for our offering, and we're going to take as our offering statement, I give from my humanity and my divinity, and I receive abundantly. That's a big, long mouthful, isn't it? I'll say it all one time. I give from my humanity and my divinity, and I receive abundantly. Together? I give from my humanity and my divinity, and I receive abundantly. And silently. And again aloud together. I give from my humanity and my divinity, and I receive abundantly. And so it is. Amen.